The trap went off somewhere to the left, and Riva's toe dropped flat before she even thought about it. She lay still in the moss, listening. Pulse traps made a very specific sound, a short, tight crack like a bone snapping inside a fist. She had read about them in the field manual. She had never heard one fire in real life until now. She was 19 years old, 11 weeks into her first solo survey rotation on Draven, and she was supposed to be cataloging root fungus. She waited. Nothing else fired. No voices. The forest around her settled back into its slow amber glow. The trees on Draven gave off low bioluminescence at night, warm and gold, like the whole world was lit by something sleeping beneath the bark. It was beautiful. It was also currently giving her exactly enough light to see 3 meters in any direction, which was not much. She counted to 60. Then she got up and moved toward where the sound had come from. The rational part of her brain had things to say about this. She ignored it. She found the snare line 15 meters north of her survey path. A thin filament stretched between 2 roots, nearly invisible, connected to a pulse emitter no bigger than her thumb. Illegal. Compact, manufactured by the shape of the casing. She had seen pictures of those too. She followed the line. The root hollow was large enough for her to crouch inside if she had wanted to. She did not want to. What was inside it made her stop moving entirely. It was small. Smaller than she had expected, though she could not have said what she expected. The size of a large cat, maybe. Curled into the far corner of the hollow, one wing folded wrong. Pulled and torn where the snare had caught it. The scales were gold. Not yellow, not orange. Gold, the way old coins were gold, warm and deep and slightly luminous in the amber light of the forest. It looked at her. The eyes were amber too. They were also, unmistakably, intelligent. Riva did not move. The creature did not move. They looked at each other for what felt like a long time. She knew what it was. She had read the xenobiology files during her transit to Draven. She read everything. It was a habit that annoyed most people who knew her. Aurelian Drakeling. Extremely rare. Classified as semi-sapient by most researchers, though the colonial authority had not ratified the Sentient Accord, and so the classification carried no legal weight. They hatched in clutches of 4 to 6. They were fast learners. They were also, according to the Trafficking Watch reports she had read in the same file, extremely valuable on the black market. The venom glands were worth a small fortune. The fold membranes, still developing in juveniles, still theoretical in terms of their full function, were worth considerably more. She looked at the empty forest around the hollow. No other small shapes. No other sounds. She looked at the torn wing. She pulled off her survey pack and opened it. "Okay," she said quietly, to herself as much as to the creature. "Don't bite me." It watched her with those amber eyes as she cleared space in the pack. It made a sound, low, barely audible, more vibration than noise, and then it did something she did not expect. It moved toward her. Not away. Toward. She stilled. It pressed its nose against her hand once, briefly, like it was checking something. Then it sat back and waited. Riva very carefully lifted it and placed it in the pack. It was lighter than it looked. It tucked itself small with a kind of exhausted practicality, like a creature that had run out of better options and had decided she was the least bad one. She closed the pack and stood up. She knew what the right move was, technically. File a report. Contact the Colonial Authority Wildlife Division. Let the system handle it. The system would then place the creature in a holding facility as a specimen, run some tests, probably argue about its legal status for 2 years, and whatever happened after that would not be her problem. She thought about the empty hollow. The other members of the clutch, already gone. She thought about the way it had moved toward her hand. She started walking back toward the outpost. She did not file a report that night. She named it Soul because of the way it glowed faintly even in the dark, warm and steady, like a small piece of the sun had gotten lost and found its way into her pack. She had no idea, then, what she was starting. She only knew that the forest was full of hunters, and she had a hurt thing in her bag, and she was not going to set it down. That was enough. That, as it turned out, was everything. 6 weeks after she carried him out of the forest, Soul ate her data tablet. Not the whole tablet, just the corner. He chewed it thoughtfully, decided it was not food, and left it on her bunk like an apology. Riva picked it up, looked at the bite mark, clean semicircle, perfect tooth spacing, and added keeps chewing equipment to her mental list of problems. The list was long. Sol had grown. Not dramatically. He was still small enough to curl on her footlocker, but visibly, in the way juvenile things grew when they were being properly fed for the first time. His wing had knit back mostly straight. The fold membranes she could see developing behind his primary wings were still thin and colorless, like wet paper. He favored the healed wings slightly when he stretched, but he stretched more now, which she took as a good sign. The greater problem was not the wing. The greater problem was that Sol was not an animal. She had suspected it early. She had confirmed it by the 3rd week, when he started responding to her words not just as sounds, but as meanings. She would say move, and he would move. She would say wait, and he would wait. Fine, animals did that. But then she said, one afternoon while she was writing a field report, I need you to be quiet for a while. And Sol had looked at her, and then very deliberately walked to the corner, and sat down, and made no sound for 2 hours, and had then come back and put his chin on her knee, clearly communicating that he judged 2 hours to be sufficient. That was not an animal. She started leaving her tablet where he could see the screen. Simple text first. He watched. Then one morning, she found the screen lit up with a pattern of touches, not random. He had pressed the same 3 symbols, in sequence, for times in a row. She looked at the symbols. She looked at him. He looked back. She pulled up a learning interface she had originally downloaded for alien language work. She pointed at herself and said her name. He washed her mouth. She did it again, and again, on the 5th try, in a voice like gravel slowly warming, Riva. She sat very still for a moment. Then she pointed at him. Sol, she said. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought maybe she had imagined it, the voice, the whole thing. Then he made the sound again, the low subsonic hum she associated with something like contentment, and said, Sol. After that, things moved quickly, unsettlingly quickly. By the end of the 6th week, he had 40 words. By the end of the 7th, he was building sentences, clumsy and backwards and missing connective words, but sentences. He wanted to know things constantly. What was that? What did this mean? Why did the forest make that sound at night? Why did Riva eat the same 3 meals in the same order on the same days? She answered every question. He gave her things in return. He showed her, one evening, by pressing his nose to the ground near the tree line and humming, that the forest had an underground resonance network, mycelial, ancient, tree to tree, that her survey instruments had not detected at all. He led her to a clean water source that did not appear on any map. He showed her where the old ruins were, stone shapes half swallowed by roots, carved in patterns she did not recognize. She logged all of it. She did not log him. The inspector arrived on a cold morning in the 7th week, routine audit, 2 days' notice. Riva spent one of those days building Sola hide, a concealed space behind the equipment locker where he could fit if he folded his wings flat. She spent the other day explaining to him, clearly and without softening it, that some people would not be happy to find him here. Bad people, he asked. Complicated people, she said, which is sometimes worse. The inspector found nothing. He was thorough and suspicious and found nothing, because Riva had told Sol to stay still, and Sol had stayed completely, preternaturally still for 4 hours, without a sound, without movement, like a creature that understood exactly what the stakes were. After the inspector left, Riva sat on her footlocker for a while. Sol came out of the hide and sat next to her. He looked for me, Sol said. It was not a question. Yes, Riva said. Will he come back? She thought about lying. She decided he was too smart for it to do any good. Others will, she said. Not him. Others. Sol was quiet. Then, what do we do? Riva looked at him, at the gold scales, the amber eyes, the fold membranes visible now as faint iridescent panels when the light hit right. The proof of something extraordinary sitting next to her asking what do we do like she was a partner in this, like her answer mattered. We have more time, she said. We use it. And they did. 8 months in, Sol was the size of a large dog and asking questions Riva did not want to answer. He wanted to know about his clutch siblings. Not in a grieving way. He did not have that kind of grief yet. Or if he did, it came out sideways, as questions. Where had they been taken? What happened to captured drakelings? Were any of them alive? She told him the truth. She had looked. The Orlect Compact, the syndicate behind the pulse traps, had a documented pattern. Juveniles were taken to processing facilities, venom glands harvested within the first months. Survival rate was low. She did not have specific numbers for his clutch. She did not think specific numbers would help. Soul listened to all of this with the particular stillness he had developed, not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of a creature that was filing information away carefully, deciding what to do with it later. He said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." She said, "I don't know how to do the other thing." He made the low hum. Agreement, she had learned. Sometimes comfort. Sometimes both. His fold membranes were visible now without special light conditions. In daylight, they showed as faint panels along his upper back, iridescent, shifting color slightly when he breathed. She had read everything she could find on them. The research was incomplete, mostly because no adult Aurelian had been observed in controlled conditions. What was known, the membranes, when mature, could generate a localized fold in space. Not a wormhole, not a jump, something more precise and biological, a crease in the immediate fabric of space that allowed rapid transit of the organism and whatever it was in contact with. Mature drakelings could travel between star systems, potentially without a ship. She had not told him this yet. She was not sure he needed the information to be motivated. He seemed to understand his own biology better than the research did. The threat arrived in the form of two people with clean hands and polite voices. They came as freelance xenobiologists, requesting access to the outpost specimen logs for a research project. Their identification was real. Their cover story was thin. Riva had spent 8 months becoming very good at knowing when a story was thin. She gave them the logs. Sanitized ones. She kept her face neutral and her voice helpful, and she offered them tea, which was a thing she had observed made people feel that nothing unusual was happening. While they reviewed the logs in the outpost's small common room, Riva sent Soul north with 20 minutes of quiet instruction. Go to the coordinates already in his memory. The Drakeling territory cluster she had mapped 300 kilometers out. Go now. Do not make noise. Do not use the fold membranes yet. Do not come back. She tucked a comm bead behind his right ear, under the scale ridge where it would stay. He held still while she placed it. Then he looked at her. "You'll be alone," he said. "I'm alone a lot," she said. "It's fine. They might hurt you." "They won't. I'm not what they're looking for." She straightened up. "Go, Soul." He did not move for 3 seconds. She had learned that 3 seconds, for Soul, was a long time. It meant he was making a real decision. Then he went. Into the tree line, low and quiet, gold scales dimmed by some voluntary mechanism she had never been able to get him to explain. He was gone before the forest registered him. Riva went back inside. The two agents found nothing. She had expected that. What she had not expected was what one of them said as they were leaving. Quiet, not quite threatening, entirely deliberate. That whatever she thought she had saved belonged to the compact, and it would come back to them eventually, because things like that always did. Riva said nothing. She watched them go. She filed an incident report with the Colonial Survey Corps the moment their transport cleared the tree line. Nothing came of the report. She had not expected anything to come of it. That night she sat outside the outpost on an equipment crate and listened to the forest. The amber light was steady. The resonance network was humming something deep and slow through the ground. She pressed her boot sole against a root and felt it. The comm bead registered 1 ping. Barely a signal. Just enough. She pressed her hand against the root for a while, feeling the hum, and thought about the fact that she was 20 years old, alone on a survey outpost, having just sent away the most extraordinary thing she had ever met to protect him from people who saw him as a product. She thought about the way he had said, "You'll be alone." She thought about the fact that he had gone anyway when she told him to. She thought, "When I am older and better and have more tools, I am going to make this right." She went back inside. She made her report. She went asleep. The forest breathed amber light all around the outpost, warm and slow, the way it always did. Steady as a kept promise. She would get there. She just had to build the path first. The signal came in on a deep band frequency that nothing biological was supposed to use, and it repeated every 4 hours like a clock that did not know how to stop. Riva was 34 years old. She was sitting in a briefing room on Ferris Orbital, reviewing a trafficking interdiction report with her junior analyst, when the signals team flagged the anomaly. She read the frequency range and put down her coffee. "Pull the full spectral pattern," she said. The analyst pulled it. The pattern came up on screen, a repeating sequence, structured, non-random. Not a device signature. Biological. Originating from the Vethra system, 3 jumps out, from a facility registered to a research subsidiary of the Orlec Compact. Riva looked at the pattern for a long time. She had spent 15 years in the Colonial Survey Corps. She had built a career in protected species enforcement specifically because of what she had seen on Draven. The pulse traps, the empty hollow, the way an entire clutch had been reduced to one injured survivor in a root mass. She had gotten good at her job. She had been told, several times and by several people who meant it as a compliment, that she was relentless. She had not heard from Sol in 15 years. The comm bead had gone silent 3 months after he left, which was either signal range or something worse, and she had spent an uncomfortable amount of time over the years choosing to believe it was signal range. The Aurelian Drakeling was officially extinct in the wild. The Survey Corps had made that determination 4 years ago, based on field surveys that found no evidence of living populations. The last confirmed sighting had been a juvenile in the Draven Northern Corridor. She looked at the signal pattern. She looked at the frequency band. Then she pulled the Colonial Survey Corps Emergency Ping Protocol reference from the system database and put it next to the signal on screen. The structure was not identical, but it was close. The rhythm was close. The interval spacing was close. It was the kind of close that happened when someone had learned something from a human and then tried to reproduce it without the exact tools. Her analyst, who was 26 and very good at reading the room, said nothing. Riva went to her commanding officer within the hour. She laid out the signal, the analysis, the frequency match, the compact facility's documented history of biological research projects, and her request for authorization of a covert extraction mission to the Vethra system. Her commanding officer listened to all of it. He was a careful man who genuinely respected her record, and he told her, carefully and with genuine regret, that the answer was no. Vethra was outside colonial authority jurisdiction. The compact subsidiary had legal standing. There was no treaty mechanism that applied to a signal anomaly, however suggestive. He could not send a Survey Corps team into a legal gray zone on the basis of a pattern match. Riva said, "Understood, sir." She went back to her office. She wrote her resignation letter. It took about 7 minutes because she had been composing it in the back of her mind for 15 years and had never let herself finish it until now. She submitted it. Then she went to her quarters and packed a bag. She knew a former compact security contractor named Doss who had helped her on a case 2 years ago and owed her a favor, a real favor, the kind that came from her not filing a certain piece of evidence that would have ended his ability to work in any legal capacity ever again. She sent him a message. She knew a xenobiologist named Yin who ran a network dedicated to documenting compact abuses and had been trying for years to get inside a compact research facility. She sent Yin a message too. The transport to Vethra left in 4 hours. She had a forged cargo manifest, a cover identity, and a plan with at least 9 points at which everything could go wrong. What she did not have was certainty. She did not know for sure that the signal was Sol. She did not know for sure that he was alive. She did not know what 15 years inside a compact facility did to a creature, even an extraordinary one. She thought about this on the transport. She was good at thinking clearly under difficult conditions. It was her most useful professional attribute. She ran the logic forward and backward. The signal was structured. It was repeating on a schedule. It was using a pattern that resembled human communication protocols. Whatever was in that facility was still thinking, was still trying to reach someone. Riva pressed her head back against the seat and closed her eyes for exactly the length of time it took the transport to clear Ferris Orbital's range. Then she opened them and looked at the star map. 15 years was a long time to make someone wait. She was not going to make it 16. Vethra 9 was a cold moon with no weather worth naming. Just a constant gray wind moving across flat rock and a canyon system that cut the surface like an old wound. The compact's facility sat at the bottom of the deepest canyon, pressed against the rock face, lit by cold white lights that made everything inside look like a diagram of itself. Doss got them through the outer perimeter using a stolen access code and 14 minutes of extremely tense silence. He took a burn from a secondary scanner on the way through, a line of heat across his forearm that he wrapped without comment and kept moving. He did not complain. Riva had not expected him to. People who complained under fire did not survive long enough to owe her favors. Yen had the internal map from intercepted compact shipping manifests. The facility had 3 levels. Containment was on the lowest level, accessible by 2 routes, 1 elevator, 1 maintenance shaft. The elevator was watched. They took the shaft. It was worse inside than the intelligence had suggested. The upper level held administrative functions and equipment storage. The middle level held laboratories. Riva moved through both levels quickly, not looking too long at the equipment, categorizing what she saw with the professional detachment she had spent 15 years building. The middle level held 17 containment units. 16 of them housed juvenile drakelings, small, some of them clearly very young, none of them reacting normally to the presence of strangers. They did not move toward the sounds. They did not investigate. They sat in the corners of their units and watched with a flat stillness that was nothing like the bright stillness of a creature deciding what to make of you. It was the stillness of something that had learned that any reaction brought consequences. Riva stopped at each unit long enough to register it. She did not allow herself more than that. Not yet. The 17th unit was on the lowest level, behind a door that required 3 independent clearances and had its own power feed separate from the main facility grid. The researchers had labeled it in their logs as Specimen Oral 1. She had read those logs on the transport. The logs described a mature male, fully developed fold membranes, estimated age consistent with a 15-year-old juvenile rescued from Draven. Consistent with. She stood outside the door while Doss worked the clearances. Yin was behind her, pulling data from a wall terminal, saying nothing. The facility was still quiet. They had maybe 20 minutes before a scheduled guard rotation put eyes on the sections they had already moved through. The door opened. The chamber was enormous. It had to be. The ceiling was 8 meters up and the space was still barely sufficient. 17 separate restraint systems ran from the walls and floor and ceiling in overlapping lattices, all connected to a single, fully developed adult Aurelian drakeling. He was the size of a shuttlecraft. His scales were gold. The deep, warm gold she remembered, though older now, the same way all things looked older when they had been through a long time of difficult things. His fold membranes were fully visible, even in the white facility light, broad iridescent panels running the full length of his back behind his primary wings, shifting slowly with each breath. He was looking at the door when she walked in. He had been looking at it before it opened, as if he had known. She stopped at the edge of the light. He went very still. Riva had rehearsed what she was going to say on the transport. It had seemed reasonable at the time. Standing in the chamber, looking at him, at what 15 years had made of the creature she had carried out of the forest in a survey pack. None of it felt right anymore. So she said what was true instead. I told you not to come back for me. You could have at least returned the favor. The sound that came from him was subsonic first, felt in the sternum, in the back teeth, in the floor underfoot. Then it resolved into words, in a voice that was nothing like the small, uncertain voice she remembered, that was deep and slow and careful in the way of something that had been waiting a long time to use it properly. You took too long. Riva breathed out. Yeah, she said. I know. There was no time for anything else. She nodded to Doss. He moved to the primary restraints and started cutting. Yin pulled the containment field emitters from the wall, methodically, by order of priority. Riva stayed at the edge of the room and kept her eyes on the corridor monitor she had wired to her wrist display. The restraints came down one system at a time. When the last one fell, Sol stood up. Slowly, like a creature relearning what its own weight felt like. He stretched one wing, then the other, and the fold membranes caught the light and threw it back in colors that had no names in any language Riva knew. He looked at the walls of the chamber. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at her, and she knew, without him saying it, what he was going to do first. He went upstairs and freed every juvenile in the facility with a focused calm that did not look like anger and was worse than anger. It looked like a decision made a long time ago, finally being carried out. He destroyed the data cores on the way back. Clean, surgical plasma bursts. No dramatics. Just removal. The facility alarms went up with 4 minutes to spare. Sol did not run. He folded space, a localized crease, small and precise, just large enough for all of them, and pulled them through. They came out above the canyon. Cold air. Open sky. Alien stars. Riva hit the ground harder than she meant to and felt Soul's wing catch her before the second impact. Enormous and warm and solid. The way a wall feels when you fall into it, and it turns out the wall was waiting to catch you. She stood up. She was shaking slightly, which she noted and set aside. Doss looked at his burned arm and then at Soul and said, very quietly, right. Okay then. Above them, the young drakelings were rising into the dark air one by one, uncertain and slow, testing wings that had never been used for anything but containment until now. Riva watched them go up. Soul watched her. Now what, he said. She thought about it for exactly as long as it deserved. Now we make it so this can't happen again, she said. It was what she had been working toward for 15 years. It was the same answer she had given herself in the forest the night she carried him out. She just had better tools for it now. And this time, so did he. 3 weeks after the facility, the Orlect Compact's legal cover was gone. Yin had sent the data to 6 interstellar press organizations and 3 independent treaty bodies in the same hour they cleared Vethra 9. The files included 15 years of internal research records, specimen acquisition logs, and the results of the Compact's own sapience testing. Tests the Compact had run to determine whether the drakelings were intelligent enough to respond to conditioning protocols, and which had, with magnificent irony, produced documented proof that they were intelligent enough to be protected by every sentient rights treaty currently in force. The treaty bodies ratified drakeling protections within 8 days. The prosecutions started on day 11. Riva tracked the news from the neutral registry vessel that Yin's network had provided. Sitting cross-legged on a cargo crate with a cold drink she was not paying much attention to, reading updates on her tablet, while Soul occupied most of the ship's forward hold because there was nowhere else large enough for him to sit. Her commanding officer had sent 3 messages. The first rescinded her resignation. The second asked when she was coming back. The third contained no text, only a forwarded news article about the Compact prosecutions, and at the bottom, in his characteristically minimal style, the words, "Well done." She had not replied yet. She was not sure what she was going back to, or whether what she was going back to was the same shape as what she had left. She went to the forward hold. Soul was lying with his head near the hold's viewport, watching the stars move in the slow way they moved at subliminal speeds, which was to say barely at all, just a faint drift that required patience to notice. She had learned, years ago, that Soul had a great deal of patience. It was something the facility had not been able to take from him. She was choosing, consciously, to be glad about that and not to think about the rest. She sat down near his head. The floor vibrated faintly with the ship's drive. "How are they?" she asked. He did not need her to specify. The 17 juveniles were in the main hold, tended by 2 of Yin's xenobiology team. They were eating better. Some of them had started to move around voluntarily, which had not been true in the first week. "They are scared," Soul said. "They do not know what comes next. They have not known what comes next since they were very small. What do they need?" "They need what I had," he said. "Someone patient enough to answer questions." A pause. "And what I did not have," he added. "Others like them." Riva looked at the stars. "There is a protected reserve," she said. "The treaty body set it up in emergency session. On Draven. They are calling it a rehabilitation preserve, but what it actually is a place where no one can legally touch them." "I know," Soul said. "I read the treaty text." She looked at him. This morning, your tablet was on the crate." She made a note to stop leaving her tablet on the crate. "The young ones cannot be left alone," he said. "They do not know how to teach each other. In a normal clutch, adults pass knowledge through resonance sharing, a biological process. They cannot do that yet. They do not have enough control. So they need someone who can bridge that," Riva said. "Yes." "You?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I am asking you to help." She looked at him directly. He looked back. The amber eyes were the same as they had always been, deep and steady and carrying a great deal more history than they should have, given how young he actually was. He was 15 years old. He should not have looked like that. But then, she was 34, and she knew she did not look entirely uncomplicated either. "Soul," she said, "I carried you out of a root hollow because you were small and hurt, and it was the right thing to do. I don't know that qualifies me for this." "It qualifies you exactly," he said. "You did not help me because I was useful. You did not help me because you wanted something. You helped me because I needed it. He paused. They need the same thing. Someone who helps because it is right. She sat with that. Then she picked up her tablet and sent a message to her commanding officer. It said, returning to active duty. Requesting reassignment to Draven Protected Zone, Species Rehabilitation Support. I'll explain when I'm back. She put the tablet down. All right, she said. They returned to Draven 14 days later. The forest was as it had always been. Amber-lit, slow-breathing, enormous and patient, the bioluminescent trees glowing the same warm gold they had glowed when she was 19 and lying flat in the moss listening to a pulse trap fire. Sol landed in a clearing near the old outpost site. The outpost itself was long gone. There was only forest, the roots spreading wide and the amber light filtering down, and the clearing barely large enough for him. The young ones came down behind him, one by one, cautious and slow. Some of them paused at the tree line. Some of them moved immediately into the forest, drawn by instincts older than their captivity. One small female with pale copper scales sat at the edge of the clearing and pressed her nose to the ground, and went very still, and Riva understood, watching her, that she was feeling the resonance network for the first time. Sol looked at her across the clearing. After a moment, he made the sound. Low, subsonic, felt in the chest rather than heard. The sound she had been hearing in her memory for 15 years. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Then she opened them. All right, she said. Let's get to work. Somewhere in the canopy, a young dragon tried its fold membranes for the first time. There was a sound like a breath held and then let go. And then there was only the amber forest, warm and steady, the way it had always been. The way it would be for a long time now.